Skip the boutique price tag and watch as I turn a cheap DIY kit into a Klon Centaur clone using those magical diodes. Come on, what could be better? Hello people, Joe from Hello Cellular Effects here. Welcome to today's video. In today's video, I take a cheap Chinese kit and change it into a Klon Centaur clone using all the knowledge that I've gained over the last 15 years of building effects pedals, most of which has been at sea on a Royal Navy warship. If this is something you'd be interested in, stay around to the end and you'll get to hear this Klon Centaur clone in action. Cheers. Here we have it, everything you get with your kit for the cheap Chinese clone of a Klon. Well, I say cheap, it's not that cheap, but it doesn't come with these Bakelite knobs. I have purchased them separately. It comes with a smaller set that is still in the bag. And I have sprayed the enclosure, so I've added the Hello Cellular Effects decal on here. And I've also added a peace sign onto the Centaur's arse cheek, because why not? I had to make it my own. I haven't opened this yet, but I have snuck in a set of proper Klon diodes. So these are the same as the originals used by Bill Finnegan. I'm going to use a set of them, and I do know that everyone uses a Klon with the gain all the way down, so the diodes don't actually make any difference. But I'm going to add the real diodes in there just to make it a little bit more quote-unquote boutique. So you get this massive A3 in fact it's not quite A3 I don't think, this massive manual on how to build your Klon, which is, well, rather nice I think. It shows you a step-by-step guide on how to do it, which is great, and it also gives you a bit of fault detection. I'm really impressed with this kit. I mean, it cost me £50 for the kit, which is perfect. You get all of this stuff in, so you get your snippets of wire, which, you know, I'm not going to use because I have my own wire that I like to use. Also, I never had a battery snap to a pedal unless it's a vintage fuzz face or something like that. Not bothered about that. So that can go, but I really like the fact that you get brown feet like the original Klon. That's fantastic. It's a miniature pointer knobs that are in the vein of a Klon. I'm not going to use them, but it is a nice touch. PCB seems quite nice. I mean, Lantone makes some great enclosures. I've used their Klon enclosures before. You know, it's all nicely labelled up with the values rather than part numbers, so you can go direct. And they have actually supplied, I don't know if you can see there, the pack of resistors has got all of the values wrote on the resistors, which is handy because I've forgot my multimeter, so I wouldn't be able to do that. And all of our caps are in here. You can see that you know, there's nice quality caps here. The pots seem a reasonable quality. I don't know what these diodes are, but they are germanium, so I'll save them and use them for something else. I'm of course going to use my my Klon diodes. I forget what type they are, but they are the originals. And one thing I will say is the stomp switch, although reasonable, I mean, maybe you won't be able to hear it here, but here's the stomp switch, and here's my stomp switch. My ones have gold pins and are significantly softer to touch. Oh yeah. So softer to touch, and these are a bit harder to touch. They're just a bit less quality. I mean, they're still good, but just not quite as good. So I'm going to put that to one side. Maybe I'll save it and give it to someone with one of the kits that I sell on the cheap, of course. And I'm going to use this, and I am going to use my my brass washers, copper washers for both my power jack and my stomp switch. So we'll put them to one side along with that. Now, with these kits, I always like to start with the resistors. As I've said in the past, resistors are a low profile, so they're easy to put on the board and then maneuver around, so it's worth doing them first. Then we'll move on to our sockets for the op amps. Then we'll do our capacitors, then electrolytic capacitors, and then lastly finish on our diodes and insert our op amps into the holders before we wire it all up and get it in the enclosure. Right, I'm going to make a start on the resistors. There we have it. All of our resistors are now fitted to the board. I'm going to move on to the box capacitors. As ever, I'm trying to jump a step. Whoa, 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 sweet child of mine. Joe, calm down. Let's look at what's next, really. So I'm going to fit these IC sockets next. Now, the last kit have really cheap IC sockets, the same IC sockets that I use, but these are the better ones, and they come with this kit, so I'm quite impressed with that. Now, there's a little notch out of this IC socket, and that notch has to line up with the notch out of the little drawing on the board. So we're going that way round. Now these sockets, the pins are a little bit more stout, so you can't really bend them into shape as I normally would, or bend them to hold it in place. So all I do is hold it in with my finger and then give it a quick tack sold to hold it in place, and that way when I turn it over it's not going to fall off the board. I will resolder that joint once all the others are soldered in, and I'm going to go ahead and fit the other IC, which, as we can see, the little chip out of it or nick out of it is pointing that way. So I'm going to do the same with my IC socket. There we have both IC sockets now fitted. Now I'm going to move on to the box capacitors. Almost. As I was going through then, I just noticed there's another IC on the board, so I'm going to go ahead and fit the third socket. Now for the box capacitors, I'm literally just going to pick them up one at a time, find a value, and then put that on the board wherever it is labelled up. Now this one here is 222, which can be either 2200 picofarads, 2.2 NF, but handily on here they're just labelled up as you see them. So 222 will fit here, and if I pick a different one up, that one looks bigger. That one's 394, so that is 390 NF, because 4 is in hundreds, and that looks like it'll fit right here. Again, I'm just going to go down and fit all of these box capacitors. There we have all of our box capacitors fitted and our small value capacitors fitted. Next, I'm going to move on to the electrolytics. One thing of note with the electrolytics, again, I'm just going to be fitting them one at a time as per their value. For example, this one is a 100 UF. No, it's a 100 volt 1 UF cap, and I can see there's some 1 UFs at the bottom there, so that would be it. And the shaded side of the board, I am assuming, is the negative side. I mean, I'll look at the diagram provided and it'll tell me which way round they go. And then something like this one here is telling me it's a 47 UF of 50 volts. I can see there's a 47 UF wanted there. Easy. Now we are on to diodes. So we have some clearly marked up 4001s, that is these, and you can see which way round they go because there's a little shaded in part. And there's another one that says 12 volt. That's a 12 volt Zener diode, that is this one here. That's going to go in there. And then we've got our 1N34As, which go in opposite ways round over here in the clipping diode section. Now the original Klon Centaur had these in a different package, but these are what come when I've ordered 1N34As from my guy. I got a diode guy, of course I have. So we'll see how they sound. There's our germanium diodes fitted and the diodes on our power section fitted. Next is going to be a case of adding in our pots. But before we get to that, I'm going to go ahead and put our ICs in place because I always forget to put them in, and then when I come to test the pedal I'm like, why doesn't it work? Because I haven't put the ICs in. So I'm going to do that now. Looking at this drawing here, it shows both of these are the op amps, TL072, great op amps, cheap but great. I say it every time, but I think if these were £30 each, people would be raving about them, but because they're cheap, people don't. And then here is the op amp for the charge pump. So if we hold this way, this way round, there's our charge pump and there's our two other op amps. I'm going to go ahead, fit them now. There's our 3 pots now added. And that is us just about ready to go. All that's left is to add the wire in to attach to our jacks and our stomp switch. And they give us this handy wiring diagram. So we've got our output jack with 3 connections, and I'm assuming that's because when it's unplugged it disconnects the supply, which is weird because normally I have that on the input. Doesn't matter. You've got an input jack over here, 9-volt battery, which I'm not going to fit. Apologies to all you battery lovers out there, I'm just not doing it. And then our stomp switch comes from these connections here. So I'm going to go ahead and run wires. They're going to mount from underside of the board and come out. Oh yeah, and our 9-volt, almost missed the 9-volt. They're going to come out from the bottom of the board and go to where they need to go. Loads of pink wires everywhere now, which is perfect. All of our wire is now in place. Next is going to be fitting this board into the enclosure and fitting the LED at the same time. I'm going to loosely fit the LED into the enclosure and leave the legs poking up, and I'm going to slot the 2 legs through these holes, and that way when the PCB comes to rest inside the enclosure, the LED will be the right height. It says in the build documents to leave 13mm in between the LED and the PCB. Well, I'm not going about measuring it. I think this will be much easier. The first thing the first issue I've had with this PCB is right now with this LED. There's absolutely no labelling apart from the circle, which I'm guessing the flat edge is the negative side, or the cathode of the diode, LED, whatever. Not too sure, so I've had to revert to looking at this drawing, and over here you probably won't be able to see this very well through YouTube, but the LED is fitted there, and I can see inside the LED the little split in the internals is pointing towards that way, pointing inboard, which is the positive side. So I'm going to orientate mine so then the split is pointing inboard. Now you've seen how I populate this PCB for the Klon Centaur clone, I'd like to ask, would you people like to see me offer these as a staple? Building cheap Chinese kits and then offering them with a bit of Hello Sailor twist? Or would you like to see a video of me building 2 of these, one with the original components and another with the largest, most ridiculous components that I can squeeze onto this board? Let me know in the comments. I did indeed get rid of the switched connection to the output jack. There's just no point in having it. We're not running a battery and it was more hassle than it's worth, so it's gone. Now we're on to wiring up our stomp switch. This handy diagram here shows us exactly where each wire goes straight off the board. So I'm going to go ahead and wire them in now. Here's our stomp switch fully wired up. Last thing to do, or the last couple of things to do, is firstly get some cable ties in here just to annoy my father-in-law who hates them. Cheers, Glyn, nice one. I say it every time, but that's why I put them in. There we have the finished product. I love these Dakaware knobs, they look so good over gold. I mean, Mark Finnegan, is that his name? He got it so right with the colour scheme, didn't he? And there's our cable ties in, fully wired up. And of course I've signed the bottom with Klon by HSE. I mean, I shouldn't really have wrote Klon on it because it isn't a Klon, it is a clone. But there you go. Now that's the end of the build process. I'd like to know what you think about the tones you're about to hear. Please let me know in the comments if you think this sounds like a cheap Chinese pedal or a custom booty Hello Sailor pedal, or a bit of both.